Indonesia is the world's largest nickel producing nation by a large margin. This year, the country is projected to account for 60% of the world's refined nickel supply, a figure expected to rise to 70% by the end of the decade according to the benchmark nickel forecast. Yet the Indonesian government is lowering quotas for the amount of nickel ore the miners can produce in the country in an effort to stop nickel prices from falling. After rising to over $21,000 a tonne last May, nickel prices fell to $15,000 a tonne at the beginning of this year on the London Metal Exchange. That's due to a surplus of supply amid weaker than expected sales of electric vehicles. Benchmark analysts recently visited the country to see firsthand 3 different nickel operations.
The government is very keen to try and boost or incentivize prices to go up. Of course, Indonesia controls quite a bit of the nickel market at the moment. Based on our numbers, around 60% of refined nickel comes from Indonesia at the moment, and that's meant to keep increasing in the future. And there was a point in time last year when the Indonesian government came out and said that operations in the country are making margins as long as prices remain between $16,000 per tonne and $18,000 per tonne. But nowadays we're seeing prices below that $16,000 per tonne, and so we believe that miners and refiners are not really making margins. Some of them who are fully integrated, they are definitely still making cash, but some others are perhaps underwater. And so this is one of the key reasons why we're seeing the government wanting to boost prices to essentially maintain a safe environment in the country when it comes to producing nickel.
Indonesia may also be running out of some forms of nickel ore, known as saprolite ore.
Nickel resources, especially saprolite resources, which go to the NPI and ferronickel smelters, they're depleting quite rapidly. And so if they keep being produced and mined at the rate that we saw, for example, in the past 2 years, there's not going to be enough saprolite resources to keep producing after 13, 14 years based on our estimates. We also saw that the Indonesian government is quite keen to put a moratorium on new RKEF smelters. And again, this comes back to saprolite resources not being enough, but also they want to be quite cautious about how they actually mine it, the rate of it. And so because of this is another reason why we believe the Indonesian government is wanting to lower the quotas.
Benchmark understands this year's nickel ore quota has been set at 200 million tonnes, falling short of domestic ore demand.
Now, based on our estimates, there's potentially going to be a shortage of around 78 million tonnes of ore that we don't know exactly where it is going to come from. We can assume that there's going to be increased imports from the Philippines, which is what's been happening over 2024. But we also believe that some miners may start targeting higher grade areas of saprolite ore within the nickel deposits and targeting just those saprolite areas instead of limonite, which limonite is usually used for the HPAL operations. And so a combination of these two may perhaps close some of that gap. We also believe that there's substantial volumes of stockpiles of limonite, and this could also perhaps help close some of that gap. But even then, this is all very speculative. We believe that the government is going to have to potentially revise those quotas and increase them, because otherwise there's just not going to be enough nickel that is demanded within the country to meet those expectations from the smelters.
At the moment, almost all of Indonesia's refined nickel is exported from Indonesia to China, where it is turned into batteries. But producers in Indonesia are keen to supply Western markets.
It was very interesting to see that from all the different sites and operations that we visited, companies have sustainability very high on the agenda. And this is primarily because they want their nickel products to flow towards Western governments, especially for OEMs within that battery supply chain. Right now, most of those products coming out of Indonesia are flowing to China, of course. But later down the track, they do want that nickel to flow to Western countries. There is also the energy component point of view. We do know that Indonesians quite relying on coal for energy use within their HPAL operations, but also within their RKEF smelters. And so a lot of companies are looking at installing renewable capacity to supply them with either solar, hydropower, or wind energy in the future. And sometimes, perhaps even if they're not using renewables, they are looking at other less carbon intensive sources such as gas to replace the coal, at least within the short to medium term. And another key feature that was very apparent again from all these sites is that they do progressive mine site rehabilitation, meaning that as soon as a mine is fully mined out, or if after they finish constructing a road, there's a lot of deforestation and all of those factors that affect that area, their sustainability teams are very keen to essentially start replanting and replacing all of that deforestation with new areas of growth. So all of this is pretty much being targeted so that this nickel can be deemed as clean, I guess, from a Western perspective, and so that it starts flowing towards those regions.